Good afternoon, folks. We're just letting folks into from the waiting room, so we'll wait a minute until we get everybody in, and then we'll get started. So just give us 1 minute here. All right. I think we got most of the folks in. We'll have probably some others joining us as we go along. So I'm Dave Carter with Flowery Hill Institute, along with Chris Roper. We're the regional directors for Flowery Hill Institute's Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program. And we're really pleased to have a couple of folks here today that are really going to give us some insight into the opportunities and some of the challenges surrounding field slaughter. I've got a lot of experience in this, and we're proud they're going to share it with us. Just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, we are recording this. It will be archived on our website in our toolkit. So we will have the links available for that. And we'll also be preparing a sort of a FAQ document to go along with that. Um, as we go along here, if you have some questions, just type them into the Q&A. And we're going to talk for a few minutes with Don and Nick. And then as we go along, Chris and I will start fielding some questions and passing those along. There, after the roundtable this afternoon, you will be getting a 2-question survey. And very simple. Number one, we want your feedback on this particular roundtable, but also we want your ideas of what you'd like to see us cover in future roundtables. We've been doing about one a month, and we want to make sure that we're hitting some of the topics that are on your mind. And in fact, today's session came out of one of those surveys. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Chris, anything you want to say as we open this up?
I think you covered it pretty well, but welcome everyone. We see some friends that have called in and joined us, and thank you all for joining. And we know you will love the information that Don and Nick are about to share with us.
So, Don and Nick bring a lot of experience to this. So I'm going to just call on each of them to give a brief introduction and then talk a little bit about how they're engaged with field harvest. So Don, we'll start off with you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time out of the day to hear us. I'm Dawn Sherman, Executive Director at Tonka Fund, which is a nonprofit. We've been around for 10 years. This is our 10-year anniversary. And our goal is to return buffalo to lands, lives, and economy. And part of this is the economy side of it, the buffalo economy from a cultural standpoint, from a production standpoint, and allowing opportunities for our ranchers to have a place to send their animals, to enter the market, to feed their community, to feed themselves. And I'm really excited to, be part of this and, pass on what we've learned and a little bit of what we know. I know it's not a lot, so as much as we can give, but I just very excited to be here and talk about that and these opportunities that we've been able to provide for our communities. Nick, and I'll pass it on to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Hernandez. I'm the president and CEO of Makoche Agriculture Development. We are a grassroots, place-based nonprofit organization based on the Pioneer Indian Reservation, focusing on agriculture and food systems development. Some of the history with Buffalo, as an organization, we're a 4-year-old organization, but a lot of our work stems back to traditional foods, and buffalo is one of those traditional foods that we work with, engage with, and teach with as far as traditional harvesting. So happy to be here today and share some of the insight to field harvesting that we bring to the table of bringing traditional food back into our communities.
Great, thank you. Well, Nick, as you mentioned, yeah, field harvesting has been done for thousands of years here in North America, but it's really grown in popularity here in more recent years for a number of factors, stress on the animal, humane handling, etc. And explain a little bit, because now we see folks that are doing it from a cultural standpoint, but also the growth of field harvest as a commercial enterprise. And if one of you can explain, some of the considerations, the differences in those two different approaches.
All right. Well, no, that's a great question. I mean, the difference between commercializing harvesting and field harvesting, for us, for what I know, the field harvesting that we do, it is more humane because it's actually out in the field where the animals are, grazing and live and have been raised on. And so for us, we do a lot more field harvesting because that's kind of the more traditional way of actually harvesting animals, is actually out in the field, as opposed to loading up and taking to a feedlot and then harvesting in a facility. For us, we've been doing it for, I think kind of 8 years as community, as a community organization. But we do it as a way towards not only reconnecting back with our food, but as a way towards teaching community members how to engage and harvest in the more traditional aspects of locally sourcing of foods. And so yeah, hopefully that answered the question. But field harvesting is something that we do seasonally. I think we just did we're planning to do our next buffalo harvest, but we just did a deer harvest as far as like interacting with local foods just last week as an educational tool, but as far as accessing local foods within our community.
Good. Don,
Yep,
anything to add to that?
No, we're, Nick and I are pretty close here with, our there. So yeah, same thing. He touched it with the youth and an engagement. The education, part of this is a lot of this was taken away. So it's reintroducing some of the usage. It's not just the animal and the meat for us, it's from the cultural standpoint, the ceremonial standpoint, and then also the full carcass utilization that we've always practiced for our, like you said, thousands of years. This is a practice that we have done. So it's just re-engaging and bringing those youth back in there so they can understand that too, and we can continue to pass that knowledge on.
Great. When we were talking the other day, getting ready for for this, Don, you mentioned that there's some things people need to be aware of before you ever start driving the unit out to the field. So, talk a little bit, particularly when people are thinking about commercial field harvest for commercial. What are some of the important considerations before you ever head out there to do a field harvest?
Right, yeah. So there's both ends, right? The ranch consideration and prepping the ranch and getting your area ready to bring that truck down. And then there's the business side of it. So once you get, we've got to decide what size of harvest truck you want, right? Because if after a certain point you get up to those 30-40 foot trucks, you will need a Class A certified driver. You have to be registered and do all that type of stuff to be able to transport that truck. If you are driving that truck, all over within a certain radius. We've also put into, that's part of it is mileage. How far are you going to drive to do a harvest? What makes sense? What doesn't? And we've been learning through our Sacred Storm facility too, is what is the max that we're going to be able to get out and do that? As far, is it 400 miles, 200 miles, 100 miles? We like to start at that 400-mile range because that's the humane, extreme that you would go with when you're transporting an animal, even though we're not transporting an animal itself, but to try to keep everything as local and regional for the food that we're providing within our community, is to try to keep it that mileage and the carbon that we're utilizing as, little as possible. Also it's, are you going to be state certified or USDA certified? And what that entails as far as your certifications and what you're going to do. Sharpshooters, you do need certified sharpshooters on that to be able to go out to the field. It's best to always have a backup for that. And then also training your staff that, how many staff are you going to bring for that size of truck? 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, and what that's going to do. And then the next thing is how many animals? Is it, just 2 animals, 10 animals, 20? At Sacred Storm, the minimum that they will do, from the last that I know, has been 10. So a minimum of 10 animals, and they do want to keep that as local as possible within a 100-mile radius, I believe. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. So a minimum of 10, we'd like to do 20 at a time for that size of facility. But if you're smaller, some people are doing, I do see 2 to 4 animals being harvested with the smaller trucks. But from that side of it is really considering, you know, right, those main ticks that you got to have.
Nick, anything to
Nick,
add on that?
anything for you want to add from that front side of the business? If you, because you have a truck and yours is more,
Well, I mean, as far as, you know, as far as harvesting of animals, you know, within a community sense, you know, towards a production sense, you know, being mindful that when you do the even when you do a roundup, you know, you got to be mindful and being able to work with the ranch, because even when you do field kills, it's not something that you can plan on, or field harvest, I should say. Field harvest, not something that you can plan on. It's really, I mean, not something you can time, I should say, that you can really time, because a lot of variables come into play. You know, the environment, where the animals are at, especially what kind of animal you're working with in harvesting. Like bison, usually like to break through fences if they feel a little too enclosed, and they're a powerful animal, both in being enclosed. And so a lot of planning and a lot of structural integrity of the corrals and stuff are very important when doing field harvesting. And so getting familiar with the animals that you want to harvest are real important. And buffalo, they take a lot of planning, a lot of sense of how they interact with the environment. And so even when it comes to even harvesting one animal out in the field, you basically have to set aside an entire day, as opposed to, you know, a commercial operation. If you're trying to do 10, it might take you a couple days to even harvest 10. And so for even one animal to go out in the field and to have a sharpshooter, I mean, that's the real important part about taking down animals and harvesting, is that you want to do it in the most humane possible way. And that's one shot, right? Taking the one shot, making sure that you bring down the animal and not actually wound the animal to where it runs off. And those are all the important factors that we have to take into consideration when we want to take down an animal for food sustenance, as food. And so a lot plays into those variables. If you're harvesting one animal or 10 animals, right? Especially within field kill, it's that you got to plan. You always got to plan for the change in variable when it takes to harvest animals in the field.
yep. And then, you know, like that prepping, you know, I wasn't sure if I moved. Oh yeah, go ahead. I'll wait till the next question, Dave.
No, I mean, the prepping is important. So it sounds like a lot of the prepping is on the shoulder of the rancher, um, there to make sure the animals are where they need to be. You're not chasing them around the ranch. So working with that owner of the herd or the steward of the herd, I think is pretty important. Nick, you mentioned a little bit some of the differences between doing buffalo and beef, just from the nature of the animal. But for both of you, you know, what are some of the other considerations, particularly when it comes to inspection or, you know, any of the other factors between harvesting beef or bison?
I'll let Don take that one to start off.
Yeah, it's a little bit different because, you know, cattle, I just feel that they're just a little bit more calmer than what a bison is, because, you know, the bison are pretty unpredictable. They'll break through those fence pretty quick and jump and on that side. So with the considerations, it's not much different, except for with the bison, we do ask that you know, it's at least an area where they're able to move around and not feel congested, depending on how many you're harvesting. If it's one, obviously that's pretty simple, right? You can bring that one down. But if you're looking at 20 that day or something, our people have asked for at least no more than 100 acres at their end. So it's manageable. So if they do run away when they get a little spooked from the gunshot or something like that, that they're, you know, they're still managed. And you got to be prepared for the unpredictable. We've had them break through the fence. We've had them run, and something that should have took 4 hours when you're processing 10 animals, it should have took 4 hours, say. Ended up taking all day because they broke through and they're on 25,000 acres now, and you're trying to, you know, find those animals and bring them back. So you always got to be prepared for that. But with the cattle, it seems to be a little bit less stress. They seem to be they manage a little bit better. They get spooked. But a lot of it is trying to do it as the most humane way as possible. We rely on the rancher because they're familiar with their land and where the best place to put their animal is to bring that truck in, if you're bringing a truck in. Because you got to be able to have access to water. When we come to your place, we will have water normally on those trucks. But if you don't, there's water testing that needs to be done before we bring that truck out. If, say, the truck doesn't have water, you do have to send that in, ahead of time so we can verify, that the cleanliness of that water due to testing. But yeah, from the weight is the biggest difference, having to hold a buffalo up is a lot taller than a cow. So, we put that into consideration on how we're harvesting that. But everything else to me, from what I've seen, is about the same, except for the buffalo are a lot more unpredictable and need a little bit more space than the cattle do. The cattle seem to manage a little bit better through that process.
Dave, I wanted to clarify real quick as well. Some of our viewers may be using a mobile facility at a docking station where they have pens and maybe have a knock box, where Nick and Don are out in the field doing cultural harvest. So when they talk about one shot, one kill, using a sharpshooter to down that animal in the field, that is their method that they use culturally on their lands and with their process. So some of you may be wondering how they do that or why they do that, and Nick and Don maybe can help explain that, why you don't use a docking station or pins or have one location. But Don started to talk about potable water. Many of our mobile processors do go to docking stations and have a set of pins with potable water, collection stations for offal and blood. It might be good for you all to talk through that process too. And, each business can, pick the way they want to do things and work with USDA to find the right ways that they will work with you on that. But it may be important for you all to, describe that cultural aspect and why you do the cultural harvests, and then how you go through, the blood and the offal and what happens with all that.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to start, Nick, on a little bit there on the cultural side?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the cultural side, so we do field harvesting for the traditional aspects of harvesting for food, and so our focus is on not creating waste, especially with the entire animal, because traditionally every aspect of the entire animal was used for one thing or another. If it was a tool, if it was for food, if it was for food storage, if it was for creating other tools, it all served a purpose. And so for us, we try to I guess utilize all aspects with the buffalo once we harvest it. And so that also includes utilizing the organ meats for food. And that could be the stomach, which we call all the offal and everything. And so we try to capture as much as we can for the use of cultural harvesting and for cultural foods. And so when we do the harvest, we do the gutting and everything. We check out the stomach. We try to separate the stomach from interacting with the food with the meat when we harvest it. And so we take those into consideration, not to if you can't really create spoilage, I'd probably say, when you're doing cultural harvests, more when you're doing commercial harvest. But for us, the offal, the stomach, the tripe, those are all things that we capture for food. Those are more of our traditional foods. And even the organ meats, try to capture, all of the heart, the livers, the lungs, the tracheas and everything, and those are all have cultural aspects. And then also harvesting of the bone, you know, for the marrow, for soup stock and stuff. And but breaking it all down, one of the things that we do with the cultural harvest is that we do hands-on education and training by utilizing it by doing it by showcasing and having community harvest. My sons are 10 and 8 years old, and they've been harvesting buffalo for cultural aspects traditionally for majority of their life for the last 5 to 7 years. And so my son, he's 8 years old, and he can break down the cartilage and the hooves of a buffalo, and he understands that part of the anatomy and how to utilize it for dance regalia and stuff. And so, but for us, what I want to emphasize is that this way of harvesting, you know, is coming back. We're bringing back these opportunities for our community because for far too long, even many generations and many years, over 200 years, we've been separated from this animal. And this animal has been brought back into our community like in the late 70s. And so we're still creating this connection back into our more of our traditional foods and being able to access the meat as a more healthy source meat. And so doing these field harvests and these traditional harvests is our way of bridging back our cultural connections and being able to link, you know, the importance of local foods, of traditional foods, and all aspects that entangle that tie into cultural connectivity, identity, and even language development, because we utilize these spaces to be able to teach to harvesting and talking about these foods and utilizing our language. And so, for field harvesting for us and the cultural aspect opens up a huge opportunity to learn what it means to be a Plains, you know, Native American, because, you know, the buffalo were the keystone and still are the keystone species of an entire continent. But with less than 500,000 buffalo in the entire North America, which used to be 65 million buffalo, you know, we also have to teach ourselves and reconnect back with these food sources and these relatives by actually engaging in these practices.
Mhm.
Great. So Danielle typed something into the Q&A here, which was going to be the next question I wanted to ask, which is from, you know, on the commercial side, if you're doing something under inspection, what are some of the considerations, particularly if you're looking at USDA inspection, bison versus beef, or even state inspection?
For me, when on our side with Tonka Fund, as we're prepping the rancher to go to Sacred Storm for them to come out to harvest, if it's cattle or beef, obviously we say, you know, get the area ready. If we have water, you don't have to worry about that. But for the offal side of it, if you're not, if it's a non-native or we don't have an access for somebody to take that, obviously based on USDA standards, you would have to dig a hole on your property, or if you have a place to put that. So we do, you know, we will have you get that. If you don't have that available, we will try to bring our skid steer down to dig that hole if they're not able to do that. So there is some wastage that does happen in some of these if there is not a community to be able to take the offal on that side. So, but what we usually do is we try to prep everybody ahead of time. And it's the same for cattle, for the offal. And our community that will, if we are harvesting cattle, they will take the same organs, you know, everything as Nick had talked about, as far as the tongue and, you know, the liver and some of the organs within the cattle. I just hear, you know, we can tell the difference to us that have eaten the stomach and everything of a buffalo compared to a cattle. There is a flavor profile difference we've noticed from our side with it on a cultural aspect. But we try to just get everything prepped ahead of time. And then when you get ready to schedule, we will try to find community members, and we call elders. A lot of our ranchers already have that availability, and maybe you get some of the people that are on here have that. You have community members are like, don't waste the liver, I want the liver. Don't waste the sinew, don't waste the bones, right? Things such as that would normally go in that hole or would be thrown away or burned. we engage the community member and say, we're having a harvest and we're harvesting 20 animals or 10 or 4 or 1, like Nick said, on this date. And then we usually have community members that will come and take those away right away. They bring their garbage cans or those big, plastic buckets. And they're there and they have to take it off the property immediately. So it's pulled, it's given to them, and they drive away, and it's up to them to do all the cleaning and taking care of everything that they do. If you're doing a multi, that's including heads, that's including the hides, anything that is of use, we will try not to throw that away. And then engage the community members to come over on that day of the harvest, and they're able to do that and drive off. So as little goes into the ground as possible. Nick, did you want to answer some more there? Sorry. Try to give a little.
I mean, I guess, on the inspections and certifications, it does come down to creating those plans, not only in harvesting the animal, but also in the handling of the meat, and then the offal itself. Those are all separate operations, but they should come with plans. And we're starting to understand, right, there's other processes for even handling offal, because you do see that on store shelves also. You do see tripe, which is made in you find that, I think it is menudo, right? I think utilize tripe and stuff. But for us, we utilize that in our more traditional soups as paniga is what we call the tripe. But those are commercial processes too. But they also have plans for processing even the offal, or even the organ meats and stuff. And so it's getting familiar with what parts of the animal do you want to capture and be able to process for foods, and what parts of the animal do you need to bury based on your processes. And so it's all about planning and how you want to utilize, but we're always mindful, because that's more of our traditional food, and we don't want to waste anything. And so we try to work as hard as we can to be able to break down, capture, give away, utilize in all aspects, both culturally, both in food, the entire animal, so that it doesn't, and you can't really say go to waste, because even putting the parts of the animal back into the ground is just a transfer of energy. And then saying it's going to waste is probably not even the right term. It's basically, we're just transferring of energy, putting that part of the animal back into the ground to regenerate, to regenerate the soil. And so it's just how you look at it. But for us, it's just a transfer of energy.
And then I think the inspections on the mobile facility is very similar to ground, just a regular, turnkey operation. You still have to have your HACCP plan and all those plans, like Nick said. And then, if it's going to be state or USDA, have that inspector get a hold of your local inspector to come walk through the unit, make sure everything's where it needs to be. And then, and it's just having those plans, like Nick said. And if you have a plan for the offal, what is that? And we know that has to always be separate from the meat itself. So is always just to have that plan. And then to, what we've noticed is some of the offal handling is just to be open with your inspector, right? Because they are starting to understand the cultural significance from us on that standpoint. So the inspectors are, happy to work with you to understand that when it's, from a cultural standpoint, and you're trying to utilize as much as possible.
I'd like to add to that
Yes,
too. And
yeah.
Don and Nick, you guys are doing great things. And, we have to keep in mind a lot of our folks that are joining us today. We have folks from Wyoming, Montana, Kansas, South Carolina, and they may face different challenges that maybe you've already faced or maybe you haven't faced yet. But, just being open and having the conversations and planning, we have these webinars not to, shock you or to, it's to bring awareness and to talk through these different things that can happen. And I know some of you are probably listening on and go, well, our inspectors won't let us shoot out in the field, or our inspectors won't let us do this or do that. Well, it's about having these conversations, and sometimes they're not easy conversations, or sometimes you may need to, raise the bar a little bit and talk to somebody different. And I can tell you, Nick has really paved the way with some of this, and Nick did some of the very first field harvest with USDA to prove that it could be done. So this hasn't been an easy road for them, but they've been years in the making of what they do, and it's about feeding their people. And Nick, I think it may be important if you can talk a little bit about how you've helped everyone in this industry to be able to do field harvest, but then also how that has allowed you to put this cultural meat back into your feeding programs.
Yeah. I think I think the what we're getting at is rebuilding food systems. So within most underserved communities, or even, towns, towns of where I'm sitting at right now, historically, a lot of them existed by having access to food systems, having access to these delis, to grocery stores, to processing plants. And most communities don't have those anymore, or probably never really had those things. And so for communities that are trying to rebuild their food systems, we also have to develop the infrastructure and the accessibility to do that. And so what we're trying to do at Mokoche is to rebuild our local food system, and to be able to build those place-based facilities that we need, but understanding that we need to have access to the other pieces of infrastructure. So if we have schools, right? We've done surveys. We work with surveying our schools and our local businesses, and finding out that 90% of our population wants access to local foods, right? Local foods within a 100-mile radius to out to a 400-mile radius, but understanding that we don't have large capacity food storage. And then going down the line and identifying the other facilities that we lack, like processing plants, right? Distribution centers. And so in all of this work and surveying our communities, and that's what it comes down to, is planning and surveying your communities and finding out what is missing as you work towards rebuilding your local food system. You find out that a lot of other access points and facilities don't exist. And as you engage with your local food system, you have to plan to build those facilities. And storage is one of those huge facilities that you need for being able to store food, both dry, freezer, and refrigerator. And so as we surveyed our community, we saw that depending on what animals we interact with and that we harvest, we need processing plants. Here in my community, it's a cattle community. I think it's like 8 or 10 to 1 cattle to buffalo population. But a lot of our ranchers and a lot of our harvesters usually had to travel over 60 miles away to even harvest an animal. And so we saw the need for processing plants, or maybe even over 80 miles, I should say, round trip, to even harvest an animal that they wanted harvested and created to put into a consumable package. And so having surveyed, we identified that we need processing plants. Right now, we're working on setting up shop. We've been operating a mobile poultry operation, and so we have access to a poultry operation that we've been teaching to, and we've been processing at. And in the last year, in partnership with Tonka Fund and Wambly Ska Kolikichie, we came together and partnered and purchased a red meat operation, a processing plant within an 80-mile radius of our homelands and our community. And now it's one of the first community-based community-based operated processing plants within our region. And what we are doing is utilizing this facility to be able to harvest our more traditional foods of bison and buffalo meats, and bring that back into our communities by way of USDA programs. And so right now, for the first time in ever, we're able to feed ourselves in our community a nutritiously dense source of food back into our community through our USDA the Dipper program, commodities program within our community, and it's coming back with overwhelming support. But it's also, we can see this meat coming back into our communities that has never been done before. So it's opening up huge opportunities for nutrition back into our communities, because buffalo to us are more of our traditional and cultural foods. And what we're finding out in a lot of the research, and especially in science, is that access to more nutritiously dense and cultural foods is more important to our health and wellness than it has ever been before. And so we're surrounded by cattle, but we're also bringing back the buffalo populations within our communities, because of the importance of cultural connectivity and the importance of the nutrition that we need within our community. And so, but we also need to create these modern facilities to make that accessible on a community level. And so, having access to a red meat processing plant now, a poultry processing plant, and we're also, as an organization, building a multi-purpose community food hub, so that we can be able to continue educating, being able to process foods, and also store foods on a local towards regional and towards a regional development level.
So we have some questions piling up here in the Q&A, but before we get to some of those, just two quick things, because Chris talked a little bit about mobile processing units or harvest units that have a docking station and some corrals, and I think some of that's tied in. If you want to do USDA inspected with bison, with buffalo or cattle, there are different requirements. That with buffalo, you can drop them in the field and take them in, whereas amenable species, which cattle are classified are, they have to walk into the processing plant. So there are some considerations when people do that. Nick, you mentioned poultry a couple of times. So before we get to the Q&A, you're known in your area as the chicken guy. Explain a little bit.
The buffalo chicken guy.
The buffalo chicken wings. This is Nick's the guy that can talk to you
Buffalo
about
wings. Buffalo wings.
So just a real quick overview of what you're doing in your community, because it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, no, I've been interacting with chickens for the last 8 years. I started off raising 500 egg-laying chickens, and I call the eggs the buffalo chicken eggs a number of years ago. But we're utilizing poultry right now within our community as a teaching animal, because we see chickens as a species of animal that's similar to buffalo, because buffalo take up a lot of land, right, to be able to range, to be able to raise. And chickens, they don't take a lot of land. But we're teaching to our community, right, that is not grounded in agriculture, that is not grounded in raising of large livestock animals, meaning generationally. A lot of our community don't come from, we're not a large agricultural community. And so as we do a lot of this work in rebuilding our food systems, we are teaching to the systems that we are developing. And one of the systems that we have now is a mobile poultry processing plant, which we've been working on for the last 4 years. But we teach to a square foot of understanding, meaning one animal, 1 square foot, and being able to create a formula and an understanding of how to raise animals. And that could be posed on, many different other livestock like sheep, horses, and cattle and buffalo, on how you range. But being able to understand the amount of space, the amount of water, the amount of food that you need, so you create a viable space, but that it's beneficial to the animal, rather than stocking them in many and stocking them in areas, right? But for us, we're doing many aspects. We're creating place and space. We're teaching to the systems that we're developing. We're developing policies and being able to adapt and create change within our communities we're advocating for change and the systems design change, I should say, and working with many different animals and plant species, because it all comes when we talk about harvest, right? We're talking about a process towards transferring something into another form of energy. But for us, it's a human process to make food for us. But what also we need to understand is the processes that come before all that, the soil regeneration, right? The biodynamics of all of the things that go into raising animals and interacting with the soil, the soil health. And those all come into play. And we have to teach to our community members to understand where our food comes from, all the way from the soil, towards creating this animal as a sustenance for ourselves as humans, because it's a process that we've created it's a process that is created, right, to put food on our tables. But in the traditional aspects, we built relationships with these animals. And so we have to understand how we raise them matters towards creating a medicine and a food source, and how that affects us. If we raise them in inhumane manners and in unhealthy areas, then we become those unhealthy humans. And so there's a lot of aspects to that. But as we get familiar with our food systems, which a lot of general population don't understand, right, where our food comes from, we want to teach those entire processes towards harvesting and back, to where the animal was raised and came from, to even where the food comes from, back into our kitchens. And so those are all part of the entire ecosystem of what a food system is. Hopefully I answered your question on that part.
No, good. No, it is pretty neat what you're doing up there. So here's a couple of questions that came in. One of them is sort of a technical question back to using the sharpshooter out in the field with animals. Question is, so was the person use copper or lead ammunition?
That I can't tell you. I think it's just normal ammunition that they would get, but I couldn't tell you because I wasn't part of the certification there. That was with the team at Sacred Storm. So I apologize. Maybe Chris or normally I would assume it's copper and we wouldn't put lead, but I don't want to assume. So I apologize.
I typically see lead, but I don't know if there's a preference on that.
Yeah. And I don't think they require it because I didn't hear that through the certification process. They used the normal size gun that they need to do for a buffalo, and then went and bought the ammunition at the local store and went and got certified. It's 1,000 shots, I believe you have to do to get certified as a sharpshooter, and you can just go to a local place to get that sign up to get your certification.
Danielle has in here, the regional inspector said they weren't familiar with bison, so we're having to put that together. I guess one of the things that we would say is that's, part of why we're doing this is so that we can put people in touch with each other. And I know up in your part of the world, Don and Nick, your inspectors are pretty familiar with field harvesting. So I would just say that that's, one of the things where we would like to connect those that are looking for the answers with the folks that might have them.
And I was
Let's
also
see,
going to
what-
let for our tribal attendees, and some of you are from different tribes around the United States. If you're going to be in Las Vegas during the Intertribal Ag Council annual meeting or the Intertribal Bison Council annual meeting, a lot of us will be there at those conferences, and we can schedule some one-on-one meetings if you would like to. And we can also connect you with Don and Nick as well. They've always been great resources for us, and we've known them for years, and they're very open. As Nick has traveled the country, he's learned a lot about the mobile poultry processing and the mobile bison processing. So Nick's a great resource for both of those, and I don't think you're going to find that expertise probably anywhere else in the country besides Nick Hernandez.
make sure you keep them separate. You don't run your bison into your poultry unit. So yeah.
They won't fit in the plucker very well, will they,
That's
Dave?
how we got the buffalo chickens. That's why.
so so this is back on the field harvest. Where does the shooter aim for to do a one-shot kill?
A lot of the shots that we've been able to see have been basically behind the ear. As far as getting a nice shot to drop the animal in one shot. A heart shot is always the focus also. You learn about that when you're doing targeting basically with archery and everything. But a lot of the focuses that we try to focus on is being able to hit right behind the head, right behind the ear. As a focus shot, but usually taking a heart shot too. And we want to be able to do that in the most humane way, one shot, one fall, rather than multiple shots, which affects, right? That also affects your harvest. If you have to take more than one shot, then you're pretty much destroying, right, the cuts of meat that you're able to get out of the animal, and shattering bones. And so usually behind the ear of the skull of the animal is always the best. And then a heart shot is basically what I've seen.
Shot is really important if you're doing an inspected product too. So
Yep.
I know somebody I know that does a lot of that. He said he always just aims right behind the ear tag, essentially, is
Yep.
where he tries to focus on. So Chris, are we missing any of the other questions in here right now, or are we covering them?
I know Danielle would like us, looks like, to discuss some of the USDA inspection requirements a little deeper. It can vary, Danielle, with the field harvest, cultural harvest versus having a docking station with pens. Humane handling concerns come into play. You're going to always have to have potable water available. You've got to have a plan in place for dealing with your blood and offal, as Don touched on. But depends on your harvest situation, whether you're on tribal land, non-tribal land, and even some other cultures also have cultural harvesting methods that they use as well, and can be discussed with USDA on different harvesting procedures. So having these conversations ahead of time and having them written in a plan is very, very important. Don mentioned a little bit about the HACCP plan, and we could probably spend an all-day session talking about all the different policies and procedures. But the HACCP plans are really, really important, and I recommend folks to start on those from day one. And I know Abby was on the call with us, Abby Davidson from AMP. She works on these HACCP plans a lot. And having some good resources for HACCP plans is super important. Again, you have some resources within Flower Hill Institute, American Meat Science Association, American Association of Meat Processors. We can connect you with all of these resources. The majority of them are free consultation. Now, none of our folks write the HACCP plans for free. We're not able to do that, but we can connect you to the resources for free, and you can get the information for free. So AMP also has some boilerplate HACCP plans. Things like cultural harvest may not be listed in there, but we can help talk you through those processes as well. So please reach out. I know we'll run out of time here pretty quick, but we can try to help understand the process and get you connected to the right people to find each situation or find the solution for each situation.
Yeah,
Haley just typed something in here about, have you seen anyone use electrostimulation to tenderize bison meat?
I
I've
haven't,
heard
not
of,
yet. I haven't yet, so I've heard it, but I have not.
yeah, I've not seen it either. Yep.
I haven't
So,
either. Yeah. That
Yeah.
might be a
So-
South Carolina thing, Haley. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, and then like I'll bounce off of you, Chris, for Danielle, and the questions is, for me, it's just pick up the phone and call Chris, call Dave, or email or text. And then use those resources if you're getting into a roadblock against USDA, like we said, it's, you know, sometimes it's just like the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So you really just have to reach out to everybody that you know. Like they said, Nick and I are here also as resources. We can always help answer questions or direct you, you know, the best that we can. But and then going and signing up for field harvest or coming up or getting in to go watch different processes too. That's where I've learned a lot, is traveling the country, looking at these plants and learning and just soaking all the knowledge that I can, because everyone is different. What I found, no matter which one I go to, they're all different. So there's not a really, there's that standard, but then it kind of changes in your plan as you're building out your facility. It's what works for you.
Great. And we have Yvette here from the Virgin Islands that has been listening in. Chris and I had a chance to spend some time a couple of weeks ago, but asking about can we direct them to any manufacturers for mobile processing? And the answer is yes. We know of some, they have different capabilities, but I know some of them have been shipping product, you know, their units to Hawaii or Northern Marianas Islands. So yeah, we'll try and connect you with that. Um, so anyway, I think that kind of wraps up. The one thing that's kind of been rolling around my mind that is just a gold mine, and Don, you brought this up the other day, and both of you mentioned it today, is that for so much of the cultural stuff, the elders come out and they've got the institutional knowledge on what to do with a lot of that offal. And I asked Don to help us compile some of that, but some of the other folks that are on here that are with tribes that are doing the cultural harvest, boy, anything we can capture from the elders in terms of how to use that offal, we don't want to let that knowledge get lost. And there's a real resurgence going on right now, not only among tribal folks, but among the larger population on the nutritional value of offal, and some of it's pretty darn tasty. And so we'd love to capture that information going forward. So with that, we are just about up to time. But Chris, anything else you want to wrap up with here?
You know, and we didn't get to talk much about the poultry, but I know Nick has just a wealth of knowledge about the mobile poultry processing units as well. I've been honored to be at his land and to see that facility also. You know, poultry is just a different operation from red meat, and obviously the demand is there for both. And Dave and I get to work on a lot of different projects around the United States, and you know, in Nick's community, they obviously, no community typically likes to eat one protein 365 days a year, right? So people want that variety and need that variety. So I think it's phenomenal, Nick, that you all have the poultry and the red meat in your community, and you can put that into the feeding programs. Again, I'm a fan. I know you have the community kitchen. You're teaching canning. You're teaching drying. You're teaching, you know, dehydration. Just all those wonderful things there at Pine Ridge. So congratulations, everything you all have done so far. I know there's lots more to come from you both, and we just appreciate everything you're doing and your willingness to share with us today.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
on that, if you want some more information, we have a blog that we posted here a few weeks ago on why the chicken crossed the reservation, and it talks about Nick and the project that they're involved with here. So we'll have their information up here. One last question that came in from Felix was, can two cattle producers use one harvest area? And I assume you're talking the USDA inspection, and the answer to that is yes. I mean, it's mainly the areas. It's almost like two cattle producers going to a processing plant. You know, it's there. It's more about the facilities and having the water and the, you know, the ability to capture the blood. So you can have multiple producers. Shelby just typed in the chat the link to the blog on Nick's progress project. And then also for any of you that aren't in our system for technical assistance, she just tapped in there the link that can take you to the form so that you can request technical assistance. As Don said, we try and provide a lot of different types of assistance. The only thing you don't get from us is an invoice. USDA is paying us to do this. So with that, Shelby, if you can pull up, everybody's been asking, how do we get a hold of Don and Nick? Well, here it comes. So Shelby's going to bring it up here with their information. So you,
I encourage you to take a picture if you need to. You don't have to try to type it all, but grab your phone and take a picture if you need to.
Yep. So Don and Nick, you get the closing remarks here.
Well, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to share our work and to talk about our to talk about the passionate the passion that we are driving and want to inflict not only within our communities but across the communities who are looking for ideas and systems and solutions. And so feel free to reach out to us. Visit Makoche Agriculture or makocheag.org for any information. But our focus is on regenerating and rebuilding our local food systems, and to be able to share our processes, to be able to share our successes, I should say, our successes with our community. And so every opportunity that we create by engaging in our local food system is an opportunity that we get to share. With those interested and those across the board who are interested. And so feel free to follow us on Facebook, any of our social medias. We have a podcast out sharing stories, ideas, and solutions. And then if you see us out in the conference arena, feel free to talk to us. But I thank you for the opportunity to share our work, our passionate work, I should say, because it's more than just a job to us.
Right. Yeah, Nick hit it right on the head. You get a 2-for-1 with Nick, everybody, because he is also on the board of Tonka Fund. So, and he's been with Tonka Fund just about as long as I have, since we've launched it 10 years ago. But yes, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the time. We're here to answer questions. We do have some work on a mobile facility and some data that we're willing to share at Tonka Fund, like Nick said. This doesn't happen in a silo. Returning buffalo and feeding your communities and sharing knowledge. We want to share that, so then that way we can feed more people, and you can feed your communities. But thank you. I just want to say thank you, and just be like the buffalo, face the storm, and walk through that storm. You're gonna get a lot of no's and a lot of hits, a lot of knocks, but eventually you're gonna walk out of it. So if you're coming up with, there's other buffalo out there with you that's going to, face that storm, that we can help you as a herd. So just reach out. But thank you guys. I definitely appreciate it, and reach out to Flower Hill too, because they're a great resource.
Well, thanks to both of you for sharing your knowledge here for the last hour. And just a reminder to everyone, you will be getting a 2-question survey. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you want to hear about down the road. We don't have a date yet, but next month we're looking at putting together a roundtable on mental health. Coming into the holiday season, sometimes that's kind of rough for folks. So be looking for that. But we're also then looking for ideas for roundtables as we move into 2025. So with that, we thank everybody for being with us today. We hope this was very helpful, and have a great rest of your week. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.